Get excited about that. Good morning, everyone. Bore da. As said, my name is Bob Vaughan. I work for Natural Resources Wales. I'll take about 15 minutes of your time this morning, if I may. Let's see if I can get this to work. What I'd like to try and do is take you through why Natural Resources Wales got involved in this programme and the types of things that we've hit. So over 15 minutes, I'll explore the issues that are facing Natural Resources Wales. You can see the types of things that we've hit, which are very, very practical types of things. Quick look at why SBRI is helping us to solve the issues that we face. I'll look at some case studies, which Gareth went through a few, but I'll explore the ones that are specific to Natural Resources Wales. And I hope at the end of it I can convince you of the merit of following this type of programme, because I think it's really important and it certainly changes the way that I look at things. It's a good start, isn't it? Let's go back up. How do you get it good over back? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I'm pressing the wrong buttons, that's why. So it was a good start, isn't it? Natural Resources Wales is a government-sponsored body. We look after a whole range of different things within Wales. We manage about 6% of the land. We regulate 40-odd different types of industries across Wales. And at the same time, we're, as I say, a sponsored government body. We give advice to government on environmental issues. So we're really out there doing practical things, making the environment outside, nice days like this, looks really good, but we're out there trying to make it good every day of the year. So quite a big task for us. And when you go out and see parts of Wales, you'll see that it doesn't look so bad. It's quite a nice looking place. But the difficulty for us is that when you start to dig below the surface, you find that there are lots of issues that we struggle with. I don't expect you to read this type of thing, but we're struggling with things like mine waters. We've got abandoned mines causing problems. You've got problems with flooding. Forestry can often acidify areas. We've got problems with abstraction. All these types of things are affecting the environment, and it's causing us big, big problems. So, as a consequence, if you look at the whole of Wales, the blue and the green on there are what we're trying to get to. But as you can see, there's lots of yellow and orange and red, and those are the bits where the environment is not as good as it should be. So although it looks pretty good, really big challenge for us to try and tackle those things. So where does SBRI come in? Well, the truth of the matter is, we've been tackling lots of the easy things to do for years. We're quite good at it. We do lots of projects. We get out there and we do things. I've got guys running about in vans doing all wonderful things all over Wales. But the difficulty is that we've tackled the easy to do things. We've got tools and techniques out there, but they don't tackle everything that we want to get done. And to be quite honest, I've got lots of really clever guys that I work with, really, really clever guys. But they're really wedded to the approaches that they've always followed. And this is the thing we hit time and time. I've got a massive project list that I could show you for Natural Resources Wales for the next 12 months and the next 2 years. And it's the same old thing. People keep on following and falling back into the approaches that they've always used. So, since we haven't tackled the issues we've wanted to tackle, I've showed you the map. What makes us think that following the same old route will tackle the things that we haven't been able to tackle over the last 50 years? Somehow we've got to break our guys out of that sort of cycle, and that's where SBRI really comes in. I took a pile of my colleagues and shoved them in a room, a little bit smaller than this. And I didn't let them out until they'd sat down and worked out what the challenges were. It's quite funny today because today's title for the whole course is Fenceless Fencing. This was actually the little sticky that I ended up with at the end of the day that gave us the lead to the project that I'll explore in a moment. We sat them in the room. The difficulty with it is that in the usual way that we deal with things, when we said to a pile of them, what's the biggest challenge you've got? If they said mine waters, then they'd say, we've got problems with mine waters and this is what we should do. And we had to stop them at that point and say, no, I don't want to know what you want to do because that won't work. It never has. What makes you think it will do now? What I want you to tell me is just what is the challenge. So we tried to work out from that what the challenge is. And this one here, done by my colleague, a Canadian guy called Kyle, keep livestock out of watercourses. That was one of the big issues that we've got. Why do we want to keep our animals out of watercourses? Well, unfortunately, animals do what animals do in watercourses, and that causes a problem with quality. They trample down the banks. Believe me, this river shouldn't look like this. And that's mainly because animals have got in there, they've broken the bank down, they've caused erosion, caused all sorts of problems. So how do you keep those animals out of that watercourse? A good way of doing it is to fence it off and put in trees. Trees are very, very good at doing a whole range of things within the environment. From the point of view of those animals, it stops stuff washing off the fields into the watercourse. On this side of the fence here in those trees, the infiltration rate of rainfall is 80 times the amount it is on the right-hand side, because the ground has been trampled and compacted on this side. Trees and the roots open it up, the water goes in. That stops the water rushing off, it stops flooding, it stops water quality problems, because obviously stuff gets into the watercourse. Now you're stopping it from happening. Whole range of real benefits, biodiversity, air quality, whole range of things that piece of woodland will do. So why haven't we got that taken forward? Is that the solution? Well, unfortunately it's not, because most of the animals that we have in Wales, whether it's cattle or ponies or these little blighters, little sheep, I know you'll find this hard to believe, but they all prefer soft woody material to grass. I know we always think of sheep in fields eating grass. Well, if you allow them to get into woodland, this is what they do. And as a consequence, when you look out over Wales, that's why Wales is like it is. I don't think you can see much woodland in there. If you go up anywhere around the parks that we have in Wales, like the Brecon Beacons, the reason why there aren't any trees there is not because they can't grow there, is because sheep and cattle eat them and keep it bare. So as a consequence, we can't get the trees to grow unless we, there are 3 sheep for every person as well, by the way. So we've got 9 million sheep in Wales. So the only way that we can allow those trees to grow is by putting a fence around them to stop the animals actually getting into the woodland itself. Okay, that's something that we've had inherited from the States from about 1860, when the first person invented barbed wire. So fences have been very, very successful for over 150 years. But that fence there costs £7 a linear metre to put in place. The fence itself costs a lot more than the trees that we're trying to protect. And because of environmental issues, we now can't dip those posts in fairly noxious chemicals to make them last for a long time. So a fence like that will last 10 years if you're lucky. So it's a very, very expensive approach to try and protect the environment, protect trees, and allow us to stop those animals getting into the watercourse. So that's where our challenge came from. How do we come up with something that stops animals from getting into the watercourse, protecting trees? What we need is something that lasts longer than the current fence posts, or we need something that is cheaper than the current fence posts at £7 a linear metre, or perhaps we could have something that is cheaper and longer lasting. So that was the challenge we put out with the SBRI approach. To our surprise, because we hadn't entered this before, we hadn't gone down this approach, we didn't know what to expect. We had 14 applications for the programme, so it was quite surprised that we had such an interest. We had 4 companies that went through to phase 1. We're now in phase 2, and we've got 3 companies going forward. They're listed on here, and I'll run through each of those now just to show you the sort of issues that they've come up with that I hopefully can explain, that has developed something that we wouldn't have thought of. The first one, Commons Vision, they're experimenting with biochar. Some of you may have heard of biochar. It's carbon. So you're burning woody material or other material to create a carbon. They're creating a material that's biochar at a very, very small size. So they're breaking it right down to a nanoparticle size, which you may have heard of, down to the sort of molecular size. So they're burning different material. Here's an example of the type of kit they're using, which that is transportable. The carbon comes out on the far side, and then they're coating it to fence posts. The company went through all the detail of how they would do this in theory. It all sounded quite plausible, but what we didn't have from them in the first phase was anything that showed us how they would do it. And then at a meeting we had with them, they opened a cardboard box and pulled out wooden fence posts coated with this nanocarbon. Now, some of you who might be interested in archaeology knows that if you go looking for ancient settlements, you'll often find posts in the ground, and the reason why they've survived thousands of years is because years ago our forebears often burnt at the end of timber to make sure that it didn't decompose in the ground. And this is what this is doing, is creating an impermeable barrier so that fungus and other things can't get into the wood to break it down. So suddenly we've got a new version of creosote, for want of it, that's not noxious, it doesn't harm the environment, can be coated to posts, and hopefully if we can get it up to a technical phase, we can coat posts with it and they'll last a lot longer. So it sounds pretty good. They're at phase 2, progressing with it, and it's out in trials in the field at the moment. Another approach from a company, Coed Cymru. This is a charity that works with a lot of industries across Wales, trying to promote the use of wood in industry and in agriculture. They've come up with a slightly different approach. Again, traditional posts, but they're trying to produce a hybrid. Something that uses recycled plastic on a fence post so that you keep the wooden bit that rots above the ground, and then something where it hits the ground, that's the point that it rots often at the ground level, where you've got moisture and air, and they're creating plastic inserts or covers to go on the post to make it last longer. So they're also at the same stage. And interestingly, the previous company, Commons Vision, and Coed Cymru, although they've got totally different projects and they're running separately, in the testing that we're doing it, they're doing it together. So they're jointly using the same university to do the testing on longevity of the posts, and they're doing the testing together in the field. And then the final one of the three that's phase 2 is a joint venture between Liverpool John Moores University and a manufacturer in North Wales who produces radio tags. And this is a totally different idea. This is where we put the collar on the animal itself. This is one of their pet sheep. The reason why it's in this little area here, there's a bucket underneath the table that's got biscuits in it, and on top is a CD player. And in the early stages, a lot of companies wanted to put electric shock on the collars. We didn't want that in Wales. We wanted it on sound. And here they were testing the animal to see what sound repelled them away from the biscuits. It's quite funny, I couldn't put the video on here, but they proved that a certain type of rock music actually made the sheep run like hell. So what we've got onto the phase now is that the sheep itself, they've got better sound, so that it just doesn't make them scatter. It just repels them from the point that we want. The idea is that each collar talks to the other collar. You have a base station. You can both control the animals in a geographical area, but also by using the sound from placed, the radio from animal to animal, you can locate them on a map. So the farmer can sit in his kitchen table and work out where his sheep are or his cattle are. Now that's as far as we wanted. We wanted to be able to control the perimeter so that they didn't extend beyond certain areas. What they found is that because they don't think there's a sufficient commercial market for this device, they're looking at it on a whole range of different types of applications, not only sheep, but it could be on equipment that you might have on a fire engine, or it could be on tracking bits of kit that you've lent to people, so that you can work out where it is, and if it isn't exactly where you want it, you should be able to locate it and then collect it and bring it back. Because they're trying to miniaturize the equipment to put on a collar, they've identified that they can put lots of other sensors on it as well. So we hope, and this is the bit that blew me away, by the time we've finished with this, we'll not only know where the animal is and be able to control it, but we'll be able to hear the sound of the jaw as it eats. So we'll be able to look at different patterns of noise, relate that to different types of plants in the countryside, and therefore prevent them from eating the plants that we don't want them to eat, or encouraging them to eat plants that we do want them to eat. Which for us, when we're trying to control a large area and try and force animals to keep off certain areas, this will work really, really well, because we won't have to survey the area. We'll just program it in and then just discourage them from eating particular plants.
So how does knowing where they are stop them going beyond a certain point?
Well, the sound there's a sound sensor on the collar. When they get near to the area that we don't want them to go beyond, the sound goes into their ear and into the jaw, and then they repel back. Yes. Yes. Sorry, yeah. So, that's right, yeah. You're suddenly thinking, no, but the idea is that the sound goes onto the jaw and it repels them back. And a lot of, that was part of a lot of the work. The thing that really got us excited about this one was they showed that it could work, because we had another company that was trying to do something very, very similar. They went and designed the equipment, but didn't test on animals. Whereas, when we saw this, I said it was quite funny, really, seeing them playing the music, because the sheep was scattering all over the place. They refined that hugely now, so that they don't scatter, but the sound is sufficient on the jaw to be able just to repel them back from a particular place. And there are all sorts of things we're looking into that, whether we just have to put it on one sheep, the key one within the herd, or within the flock, or not. So, as far as we're concerned, we've got these lumps of wood now that this gentleman pulled out of a cardboard box, and we thought, God, that's great. The fence post itself with the spike on, or these collars around the animals. All three of them, we think now, are moving towards something that's quite commercial. And from NRW's point of view, we're not making any money out of this. These companies hopefully will take these products and spread them around. But if this works, we get what we want, which is animals out of watercourses, trees growing around Wales. That's the benefit for us, and it solves our problems. We've got to reach these sort of targets that I showed in that graph at the very beginning. But hopefully by these products coming onto the market, and perhaps even us suggesting to farmers that they should use them, then we'll get what we want, and the companies get a product as well. So, I went through the issues that we're facing within Natural Resources Wales. Big challenge. Why are we looking at SBRI? Well, it takes us into the 80-20 rule. We're going into the 20% that we've never been able to cover before, and it's making us think quite differently about what we want to do. I've gone through the case study that we're running at the moment. We're actually in the second phase with Gareth as well. So we're running 2 more now on top of this. One looking at mine waters and trying to come up with solutions to that. And we had 28 applications for that one, and the solutions for that were absolutely fantastic. And we're also looking at invasive non-native species, which are a big problem for Wales as well. And we've got 3 projects running with that one, looking at different ways of trying to control invasive non-native species like crayfish and various other bits and pieces. So a whole range of projects going there. So hopefully, in this short while, I've been able to convince you why it's an important way. And we see it as a vital way of trying to get that extra bit forward and coming up with new innovative approaches. So that completes my bit. Thanks very much for listening, and perhaps we can have some questions.